Good evening and welcome to another edition of All for United on another frustrating topsy-turvy week at United, but there's so much to talk about. Europa League, Premier League, transfers, who's coming, who's not, who's going, who's not. And we've got two quality guests to do it. Ben, how's it going?
Good, yeah, so good. Always seems like United are ruining weekends, but apart from that, all good.
Yeah, they never make it easy for us, do they? Daz, how are we doing?
I'm doing good considering. Obviously, it's never feel good losing, but for once, I've took some positives, which might surprise people.
Yeah, you being positive. We'll see how long that lasts. So yeah, we're going to go back to Thursday. We're going to have a look at the Europa League first before we talk about today's debacle. We're going to start off on a positive note, I think. There's only a few bits I want to talk about with Thursday, really, because I thought it was a really good performance. Mainu in the 10, Ben. What are we saying?
Yeah, I think it probably suits him. Amarin came out and said that he was struggling a little bit in terms of tracking like side to side and bits and bobs like that. And that area on the pitch is where he's at his best in terms of receiving the ball, turning out, and obviously he showed that the other night. I don't know if it's a long-term solution. Obviously, we'll talk about today and his position from that point. But yeah, playing in the 10, I think it definitely suits him for certain games. But then there's going to be other games where you need a little bit more pace, a little bit more of a dynamic player. Where does that leave Mainu?
There we go. I'm still here. We'll do that again. Let's go. Mainu at the 10. What are we saying?
You threw me. Yeah. I think it's suited that game down to a T in that position, getting on the half turn, tight spaces. But I think in certain games we're going to need a bit more of a dynamic play. You think of today, Garnacho and Diallo, they're probably suited for games like that today. It didn't turn out like that, but yeah, I think Mainu's got his uses, and he struggles a little bit defensively, which Amarin has pointed out. So yeah, we'll see if they keep using him there.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a nice touch, hasn't he, Daz? I think you've said it in the past, to be fair, that he's not going to be the player that sits with Ugarte in the middle, because he can be got at a little bit in the middle. But Mainu in the 10, that means Bruno's dropping deeper. What do we think about that, Daz? Bruno being deeper?
I'm not a fan. I think that this is, for me, where we've got a bit of a dilemma as a club. Because at the minute, if obviously Collier's not ready, Mainu defensively doesn't quite have the capabilities to play that role. The only solution would be to either drop Mason Mount in that position, but he's not fit, or Bruno into that position, because somebody has to play there. And obviously Eriksen's not got the legs to play there. The problem is when we drop Bruno back, we lose so much going forward. In an ideal world, I would love Bruno to play alongside someone like Mainu as the two number 10s. I think they'd complement each other really well, which obviously means we need a midfielder to do that. But then here's the dilemma, because in order to do that, you've got to drop both Ahmed and Garnacho. So I think I'm not a fan of dropping Bruno back, because I think he's such a productive number 10. And I think that this is where, like I say, where we've just got this big dilemma, because it always is as if somebody's out of position, and that wheel that turns doesn't quite turn properly, because somebody's compensating somewhere, because we've either got an injury, because we've not got a player to play there, because Mason Mount's injured. Now, I'd be happy for Mason Mount to play as the productive number 10 and have Bruno drop back, because at least Mason Mount's a natural 10. And I think given a run of games, I think he could. He's never going to replace what Bruno offers, but I think he could fit that role quite well. And, that'll allow, depending on the game, Bruno to push forward and be sort of a third number 10 at times. But yeah, I mean, I think I'd rather see Mainu utilised as a 10 than further in midfield. I just don't think he's not a midfielder. He's not a central midfielder for me, and I think that's okay to say that. I think the whole point of a player at this age is to let him mature, to let him develop, and then find out where his best going to be put. I mean, we always thought Marcus Rashford was a centre forward, but during the course of the nurturing process, we realised he was better out on the left. It's normal, to change your position slightly. And this is the perfect time to do it in a team that actually has 2 number 10s. So we're not losing Bruno to play him.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's a good dilemma to have, isn't it? To have different players working in different positions. It's just finding that balance, isn't it, really? I think I agree with you. I think if you drop Bruno deep, like today, I mean, we'll get onto today, but it was so deep today. It was like on the edge of our box, picking up the ball. And for me, that's just far too deep. I won't ask Ben too much about the second half of the game on Thursday, as I believe he fell asleep. So we'll stick with you on this one, Daz. Garnacho came on Thursday, and we suddenly started to play, didn't we? Does that just highlight his importance still to the team? The fact he has that little bit of special, he has that just little bit of stardust, doesn't he, Garnacho? And he can make things happen a bit more than, say, a Mainu in a 10 or an Eriksen.
I always prefer him coming on. I don't know why. I know some people think that because of how well he does come in on, he deserves a start. But sometimes that's not always the case. I mean, a perfect example was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, ultimate super sub, when you could argue he deserved to start, but when he started, he was never as productive. I think it's because he's still quite young and quite fearless, and he takes players on. And I was actually having a conversation about this earlier, that defenders, I don't think nowadays, are set up to cope with players running at them. And this is why the likes of Mo Salah can just run right leg it. Just because the higher percentage of players don't run at defenders anymore, they try and pass through the lines. I think that this is where defenders struggle with him. It's like you say, he's got that bit of star appeal about him, that stardust, and no one sort of knows what he's going to do. He's quite raw still. But yeah, I think he adds energy, and I think Ruben Amorim used to talk about that a lot at Sporting, especially during his later days in Sporting, when he was getting heavily linked to a move away. He was always talking about it's important to find the energy constantly. And when you're in a game that's so frustrating, like it was midweek, it's so good to bring on someone that can just change the tempo. And he did that, and I think that's where the success came from.
Yeah, I mean, the second half against Bucharest, again, I'll stick with you, Daz. Ben was copping Z's at this point, so I'll stick with you. I did
watch the highlights.
I did, yeah, okay. But the second half, I think it was a second half of football that we want to see every game. I think we were fizzing it about quick. Mainu got an assist. Mainu got a goal. The second half was just what we want to see, weren't it? Why can't we do that more often? Why do we have to? Like, the first half was so shit, hence probably why Ben fell asleep. And then the second half, why can't we be a bit more aggressive in the final third, Ben? We'll get to today, but why can't we do that every game? Why can't we fizz it about a bit quick? Why do we have to be so pedestrian half time?
It feels like it's more of an issue at home as well, to be honest. I don't know whether it's kind of a nervousness or whatever it is, or just not an understanding of the situation or the system, whatever it is, but they don't have the ability, or they're not showing the ability to play like that consistently. And I think some of it is down to the strikers, because you've got Højlund, who, to be honest, is not making any sort of runs at the minute. He's not peeling off to the sides. He's not going in behind. He's just standing against the centre halves. And then obviously Xerxes has all the intentions of coming in to try and play football. There's question marks whether he's good enough to kind of play in that pocket. But then you haven't really got anyone to hit. You think of like a Zlatan or a Cavani who we've had previously. They'd stand in the box, and there was a chance today where Garnacho did a nice turn, fizzed it across the box. No one there.
No one. Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether it's just like an insurance that they know no one's going to be there, so they're scared to do anything. And then you end up just getting into a cycle of, well, I know I can go back to Mazraoui and he's going to go along the back, and you can go to the other side. And that's great. You keep control for 5-10 minutes or whatever it might be, but ultimately you're not really damaging the other team.
Yeah, you're making it far too easy, aren't you, for the opposition when you're playing it slow? They're getting back in their shape. But we did. I thought we dismantled Bucharest quite well in that second half. we probably should have scored 3, 4, maybe 5 goals. We did really well. But I want your guys' sort of opinion on how we've negotiated the group stage of the Europa League overall. What would your sort of view on it be, Daz? How we've got through that group?
I think we've made it look harder than it should have been. Playing Porto in any given season's not always easy. I mean, we've seen him in recent years being a Champions League powerhouse, you know. So Porto was always going to be a difficult game for us. Thursday nights are always tricky just because, especially if you're in England, because most of the major cities that you travel to don't have major airports, so they've got that massive journey to the ground, and and it's just crap travelling. So it's always awkward, and ultimately this is why English teams don't win it as often as maybe they should. You can't complain automatically qualifying in the top 8. You can't complain at that, and you can't complain with being unbeaten. And as far as I'm concerned, I think Højlund is still the top goal scorer, unless that did change this week. But so you can't, on paper, you can't argue with that. But there was a few games there. Boda, I think that was a 3-2 game. That should never have been a 3-2 game. That should have been a 3-0 game. We made that far too hard for us. There was a couple of draws under Erik ten Hag, which was just, you wouldn't expect them, especially Porto. I think we was better against Porto. I think Porto, from a performance point of view, the chances that we created, was actually one of our best Europa League games this year. But we just couldn't put the ball in the back of net, which is obviously the story of our season. So I do think we've made it harder than it should have been, but we've automatically qualified. We're unbeaten in Europe, and being unbeaten, despite what's happening in the Premier League, will give this team a bit of confidence and a good foundation going forward now.
Yeah, I agree. What about you, Ben? As Daz says, we got good points against Fenerbahce and Porto. It felt like we started a bit slow, but we got the job done, didn't we, in the end?
Yeah, I think we do look down on some of these teams and think United should be kind of swatting them aside and just going there and just winning every single game. And it always doesn't work out like that in the Europa League. Like you say, travel, there's not the desire for some of the players. You think Bruno Fernandes, he's probably looking at that and thinking, I don't really want to be playing in this. Casemiro, players like that. So I think ultimately getting through in that position is all we could really ask for. We could have struggled more. We could have been in questionable situations later on. Ultimately, this is the one competition now we're looking at and clinging on to for the rest of the season. And I do also think it's good experience. You think of when we won the Europa last time, obviously Rashford was part of that squad. And I feel like it helps them younger players. You look at, say, Lenny Yoro, obviously Dorgu's come in now, Garnacho, Kobe Mainoo. Although it's not the Champions League, ultimately, we're not set up to win the Champions League. But winning a European competition is no doubt going to benefit them in the long run.
Yeah, I agree. And we seem to be, I don't think we're playing our best football because we're still a little bit iffy, but we just seem to have a little bit more about us in Europe. I don't know if, like you say, the teams are a little bit easier to play against. But we navigated the group, and I think the hardest we've got in the next round maybe Sociedad. I think, was it Midtjylland, Sociedad, AZ Alkmaar, and Galatasaray possibly? I can't remember. Possibly. So I don't think there's anyone in the next round really that we should overly worry about. So I think we should be looking to win this cup really, but we will see. We will see what happens. So then we move on to today, and then starting 11 comes out. Højlund and Xerxes aren't in it. What did you make of that, Daz? No recognised striker. What did you make of it?
I'm happy that he tried something different. I mean, we've been saying back and forth for weeks that at some point, as a competent manager, you have to look at something that's not working, not improving, even though you're persisting with it, and say, without changing the system, the formation, I need to change something, because unless you change something, the results won't change. Obviously, I'm not saying what he did today didn't work, because I thought it was one of the best 45 minutes Man United have put in this year. But playing Bruno as sort of had sort of dipped right back to more of a false nine, didn't he, at the start? And I thought that was something different, and I really like that. Personally, I know it's going contradicting what I've just said. Part of me feels that while we're playing the teams like Crystal Palace, maybe it's worth just persisting with one, either Hoyland or Xerxes, and just hoping they can get a couple of goals and build upon that. But we've been asking for something different, and he gave us something different. And I actually thought the chances that we got was because we saw something different. But again, the same problems as always. Can't put the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah, and I think that's just going to be a running theme, isn't it? Until we bring a striker in, I think we're going to be stuck like that. To be fair, does Mainu starting on as the false nine, Ben? Is that more Amorim trying something out, or is that a bit of a sad situation that our strikers are just not that good?
It felt like made to an indication of where his head's at with Hoyland and Xerxes, to be honest, because even if you look at the flaws of Hoyland, if he's your man and you think that he can get to the level that you want him to be at, you play him in games like this, to be honest. And you get him through them tough periods. We've seen, like, even Rooney went through periods where he wasn't scoring, and Ferguson would just keep playing him until he came out of it. And ultimately, if he's your guy, you do that. So to me, that was quite a worrying sight, to be honest, because Kobbie Mainoo is a good footballer. He can go and play, he can go and link, he can do this, and this, but that's not a sustainable way. You can't play Mainoo away at Liverpool or wherever it might be. That's never going to be the case. And yeah, it felt like an indication, and it felt like a bit of a go and get me someone tomorrow, or else we're doomed for the rest of the season.
yeah, I kind of agree, to be fair. Do you think, Daz, as Ben said, it's kind of where Amorim's head is with Hoyland and Xerxes? Do you think they just can't play the system? They can't play the role that he wants them to play?
I can put that argument for Xerxes, because I know I always say, let's look at how Sporting played against Man City. It's just because it's the one game everybody watched, because at that point he was the new Man United manager playing our arch rivals, so everyone watched the game, and it was a really good example of when Ruben's system works, it works really well, and the goals. If anything, Hoyland I'm not saying this is good before anyone in the comments starts, but Hoyland is a mirror of Gyökeres in terms of his speed, the way he plays, the way he likes to run with the ball. So if anything, Hoyland should be thriving in this system. He should be at least looking productive in this system, but he's not. I mean, like you say, he's not moving enough. He's not making enough runs behind the lines. It could just be that we're coasting until the summer because he knows that there's certain players, certain cogs in this system that he needs to be working well. Central midfield could be one of them, because obviously we're already linked to his central midfielder from Sporting. It could just be that he wants to get to the end of the season, bring in players that he knows can play the system from a deeper point, and maybe that will unlock the likes of Hoyland later on. Xerxes, I hate to say it, I don't think he's ever going to be the sort of player that's going to score loads of goals, but he is the sort of player that you should be able to bring on to solve certain problems in a game. Sort of holding the ball up that will unlock the players overlapping him. Maybe the little 1-2 passing that we sort of saw today in the first half, the little flicks and that get you past that line. And maybe it's just a quality issue. I mean, I said this earlier, you can't expect Andy Carroll to be Harry Kane. The quality difference is different. So maybe it is just, this is as good as Hoyland and Xerxes. Maybe they're just not good footballers. Maybe we just drop the ball bringing them in. Maybe it's just they're not good, like I say, not good footballers, and they're never going to do that. Maybe that the level that we're seeing is their level.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think I think you can just see it's a lack of quality, isn't it? Really, in the final third. There was a point in the second half where Xerxes had the ball, sort of, I don't know, around sort of halfway mark. Garnacho's just on his left, sort of 10 yards away, and he absolutely fucking hammers the ball at him. And that, for me, that's just shit. That is like a really poor quality. All he's got to do is put it into his path, and Garner's away down the left. Do you know what I mean? But instead, Garner's got to fight to keep the ball in. Just little nuggets like that really piss me off, because it's just a, like you say, it's just a real lack of quality. JJ says this in the comments. He backs Amarin, but today for me, the system wasn't it. The formation wasn't it. I'd rather he dropped it because he does not have the players for it. Now, this is something I see quite a lot online, Ben. I see quite a lot of people saying, why is he persisting with the three at the back? Why is he persisting with the wing backs? Because we don't have the players for it. But that's why we've brought him in, isn't it? Surely we brought him in because of his system, and we can't drop that, because we may as well have not brought him in, haven't we?
And it's annoying me, to be honest, all of the talk of this system, because the most successful team over the last decade has been Man City, and they built up in a free for 4 or 5 years. It's not a major issue. And if you run through the team, the players who are actually playing out of position, how many of them is it? If you went and asked Hoyland, where does he want to play? I want to play up front. Agati, midfield. Bruno in a 10. Ahmad probably wants to play in a 10. Delor, Mazraoui, granted, one of them's always on the wrong side, and we've probably fixed that with the Dorgu coming in. But it's not a massive difference in terms of how you're setting up or where you're standing on the pitch. Under Ten Hag, we used to set up like that. When you were playing down one side, you'd have a free and you'd go out to that side. So I think it's really short-sighted to just say, well, he's playing a free at the back. It's not working. We were playing a 4 at the back, supposedly, before. It wasn't working. So what do we do?
Do you think it's an easy excuse?
6 at the back.
Do you think it's an easy excuse?
And I think it's overhyped by the likes of Carragher and stuff like that on Monday Night Football, constantly going on about it. I will agree with him that the gaps down the side of the midfield are really worrying, but Sporting didn't have them gaps against Man City. So is it a system issue? Like Daz said, that game against Man City was a perfect example of how that system should work. But why can't we do it? It's because the players ultimately aren't up to what he wants to do.
Yeah, and I think that's it, isn't it, Daz? I think, like you just touched on a minute ago, I think there's a quality issue there. Like Dallo on the left, I think it's a quality issue, but for me, it's the players. The players aren't up for it.
Say, let's change the formation, but the obvious formation change would be a 4-2-3-1. He's still going to be playing the same centre forward. He's still going to be playing in this team. He's still going to be playing Ahmed on the right and Garnacho on the left. And obviously, Bruno's still going to be that playmaker. So it's not going forward. Playing a 4-2-3-1 is not a million miles different to this current system, especially when it's going to be the same players. So if this is his system that he wants to play over a 5-year project, I think, as much as I hate it, and I really had to come to terms with this, it's important for Ineos and the people in charge to see what is wrong with this squad, so he can say, I need a central midfielder, I need a left wing back, I need this. This is why it's not working, because they'll have access to loads of different data that we just don't get access to, video analysts and all of that sort of stuff. And he'll be able to take that to Ineos and say, this is what I need. The problem sometimes with changing the formation for the sake of getting results is you sort of disguise the problem. And then when you go to Ineos in the summer, Ineos could say, but you're scoring goals, but it's not the sort of goals that I want to be scoring. It's not the way this team's going to be. Because then ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to get 2.5 years out of a manager. You're going to realise that the manager can't play this sort of system that is being forced to play. He's then going to fall apart in his 3rd year, and then you're sacking the manager. And then that is the wash, dry, repeat. I do genuinely believe that Amarim can initiate really good change in this group of players and in this team, but I am also a big advocate that he needs to be putting points on the table in order to be given the time. And that's a fine line. So I've got no issues with the formation and the system. A bit like today, I just don't want to keep seeing Hoyland and Xerxes put up top when we know it's not working. Whether that's we try Bruno this week and against Leicester, he might bring Obi Martin off the bench. Just something, just, you know, let's change something, because if we don't change anything, nothing's going to change. But I mean, I said to you today, we're at fear that if we don't change anything, we massively risk not getting any European football, not even Europa Conference. What is the financial ramifications to that? And then you find yourself in the summer bringing third and fourth choice players in because you just can't afford your main choices. But then that sets you back 2 or 3 years because you've got a quality issue. So, you know, we've got to find a way at getting more points. And that is, but I'm happy with the formation and the system. If that's what he wants to play over the next 3-5 years, then I'm happy for him to stick with it, because the players at some point have to get used to this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Ten Hag had a system at Ajax, didn't he? And he abandoned that far too quick. And it's kind of touching on what you just said. As soon as he abandons that, you're getting short-term gain, but long-term, you're just treading water, and which is what I think we did with Ten Hag in the end. I went on live TikTok earlier, and I kind of likened it to buying a Porsche. You're buying a Porsche because it looks really good, and you've seen it. It's like, fuck me, this looks amazing. In the same way we did with Amarin, and then you kind of get the Porsche home, and then like a couple of months down the line, it's like, actually, I want this to be a Land Rover. There's no point buying it. Do you know what I mean? You can't invest in something and then just bin it. We've got to give the guy time. I mean, we weren't scoring goals under Ten Hag. I mean, as JJ says here, the ball was squared into the box and no one was there to bury it. That's a player issue for me. Amarin can't come on and bury that. Whoever's playing the forward line needs to be busting a ball and getting that in the back of the net. Do you know what I mean? And that's a player issue. That's not on Amarin for me.
That's the big issue. You can't blame Amorim for not scoring goals.
No.
His job is to create a team that can create chances. And we are, I think, although we could be creating more, and we did create more under Ten Hag, he's still creating more than enough to be winning games. And this isn't his team. You know, Garnacho isn't his player. Ahmed isn't his player. Bruno isn't his player. Hoyland Xerxes isn't his player. So, you know, you can't blame him for them. I think,
like in that game today, if you have a Gyökeres, or if you have, I don't know, let's just throw someone. If you have a Harry Kane, say, he's on the end of that cross. Do you know what I mean? Because he's a lot more dialed in as that striker. He's on the end of that, busting a gut to get that. And for me, then that just balls back to the player quality issue for me. The Hoyland isn't there with it. Xerxes isn't. Mainu certainly isn't going to be.
He's played enough. I think every player, including Anthony before he went in, including Marcus Rashford, he's played every single forward player probably, other than Obi Martin, who's technically not a senior player right now. He's still an academy player, but he's played every player. So he has tried different things, hasn't he? He's tried different players in different sort of roles, and none of them are scoring. And I'm convinced that Bruno should be scoring more goals. Ahmed, Garnacho, because these are good players. These should be scoring goals, and they're not. The question that I think Amarim's got is, why are these quality players not scoring enough goals? Because they are getting opportunities. But obviously, like we said a minute ago, you could argue that Hoyland and Xerxes are not getting them because they're just not good footballers. But we know the other guys are good footballers because we've seen the quality in them.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. We'll come back on to the quality in a minute. We'll go through the Palace goals, Ben. We'll do that with you, I think. Palace's first goal, Bruno was claiming there was a foul. I didn't see much of a foul. He got a little push in the back, but there was nothing there, was there?
No, it's too soft. And ultimately, I don't want to dig out Onana, but I feel like a lot of the goals I watch, I just think probably should be doing better on a lot of these. It's just become a fundamental issue now where we looked fairly in control of the game.
Mhm.
Palace weren't really. They were comfortable just doing that. They were sat there and they're thinking, right, we'll just sit here and let United just pass it round, and you get one chance like that, and ultimately that's how you get done over, and that's how we've been getting done over 10, 15, 20 games, whatever it's been like. We're just constantly getting done at Old Trafford like that. And yeah, like that comment says, Onana, flat-footed.
Mhm.
And we see that a lot. And it doesn't necessarily look like a mistake because you think, oh, yeah, it's gone up and over and whatever. But I feel like De Gea just catches that.
Yeah.
As mad as it sounds, I just feel like he just goes and catches it. Or an Allison or an Edison or whoever it might be, just goes and catches the ball. But it feels like he's very erratic. And I don't know, we're used to like Van der Sar, who so cool, so calm. The ball never bounced off him. But it feels like Onana, the ball will bounce off his head, it'll bounce off his chest, it'll come off the bar, or whatever it might be. It just doesn't look quite right in the minute.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't even that far off his line, if I remember rightly. And fair enough, it looped over him, but yeah, it's very soft for me, really soft. The second goal does. They just cut us open, don't they? Far too easily. The offside line is just awful, and it's a well-deserved 2-0 lead, I think.
Yeah, it was good football by Crystal Palace. I think it's important to give them credit where credit's due. We made it far too easy for them. It was as if that you wouldn't expect. I mean, because it wasn't far. I mean, you could argue that the back three that was on the pitch at that point. I know Martinez went off injured, but that's still a competent back three on paper. That back three should not be leaving gaps and space and like that. And yeah, it just for me, I'm putting it down to a defensive error because I know that an actual error didn't take place, but it was just really soft defending, really soft positioning, and we've sort of just said we're 1-0 down, few minutes left to go. Fuck it, take another one. You know, this is the point in the game where you should be really digging deep, defending for your life and trying to catch them on the counter, and at that point, just stealing a point. You know, and it was as if that the defence. I actually said it was as if the defence give up after the Martinez injury. You know, it was as if it was like, we've done.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. Let's move on to the Martinez injury, Ben. Is that season over, do you think? Year over, maybe?
I think we'll be lucky to see him even at the start of next season, to be honest, if we think it is what it is. That type of injury is more sickening to me sometimes than like a leg break, because a leg break, you could be back in 4 to 5 months, but a knee injury tends to be 7, 8, 9 months, and you're also not coming back the same player as you were before. You lose. I think Martinez has lost a yard this season, even after his injury last season. So I don't know whether it's the same knee as he did last time. I couldn't quite tell or work out which one was which. But yeah, it's awful. And I think in terms of us playing out from the back, not alone the defending, just playing out from the back, it's going to take a massive hit now unless Luke Shaw can suddenly turn up. If there's an international break coming up, I'm sure Luke Shaw will be fit for a few weeks. So he's going to have to play in that left centre half position. And we'll just have to hope that Martinez comes back the player that he is.
Yeah, I saw what your TikTok basically say that it's bigger than just his defensive side, and he's right, isn't he? Daz, I think the last month or so, mate, last month, sort of 6 weeks, he's been immense, hasn't he? Taking, like, moving the ball forward. The goal against Rangers, that ball into Bruno, the goal against Liverpool. He's got a real eye for a pass. The goal against City, that dink over the top. I actually think he's really underrated. I know rival fans hate him, but you would if we were rival fans and he played for someone else, you'd hate him because he's that sort of character. But I love him. I love him, and I think he's going to be a real big miss.
Yeah, I think this year we've really started to see how good he is. I know he's had his moments where, especially when Ruben Amorim first took over, he was a little bit uneasy, wasn't he? He had a couple of bit of a, he's, seems to be the worst one of the few. But he sort of grew into Ruben Amorim life, and he's become one. It actually said to you after the Rangers game, how strange is it that our central defender seems our most dangerous goal threat? It's just seems to be the most productive football on the pitch, but seems to be able to do anything, and he can really get stuck in. It's going to be a massive hit for Man United, but this is the time now where Lenny Euro has to step up, because obviously he's going to be the starting left centre back now. I thought so. Which sort of ruins potentially ruins the summer plans, because in my head I maybe have thought Harry Maguire might have been one that was moved on in the summer. And obviously Martinez, Euro, and Dilip would have been the long-term three. And that, so obviously I think he's going to be out over the summer. I don't think he's going to be back. I think it's an ACL tear. Obviously, time will tell. The only worrying thing for me with this is I'm not going to be convinced we're going to get him back, not properly, because I mean, this is 5th injury since joining United, and this is a big one. Took Virgil van Dijk good 12 months from returning to get back to anywhere close to world-class form. So even if he comes back at, September next year, September this year, sorry, how long is it going to take him to get back? And if we've then at that point got a settled three, would you want him to, if we've got a settled three at the start of next year, then they're doing really well, getting clean sheets, putting in good performances. You have to question yourself, do you want him to come back into that three? But if, you've got a good settled three. But I just think for me, it's just another injury. I love him as a player. Absolutely love him. There's nothing about him that I dislike. I'd argue his quality to anyone, But I think the only worrying thing is it's just another injury. And I know it's unfortunate, but it's another injury, and Man United can't go forward having players in this squad that is going to get injured in the season. We just can't keep doing that.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's fair. Like you say, he's starting to get a lot of injuries, isn't he now? Yeah, I hope he's not out for too long.
I don't mind a player that picks up a couple of niggles. Like you might miss a game here and a game there, and that might happen 4 times a season, but you'll only ever miss 5 games. I've got no issues with that, because Premier League's quite an aggressive place to play. But we are seeing him out at 3-4 weeks at a time, and that Manchester United defence, and I actually said this, that it needs to find stability, and the only way you're going to find stability is by playing the same 3 where possible as much as you can, because they need to start getting a relationship together. They need to start building a rapport. They need to start knowing how each other works, pros and weaknesses, who's helping who here, and you can only do that by playing together. And if you've got a player that's a starter, but he's missing a game every month, it ruins that. And
does this bring heaven into the picture, Ben?
Well,
do we get a little glimpse of heaven?
It definitely does. Not that we were probably. I was expecting him to be in academy, but then I think was it Wilcox who came out and said he's going straight into the first team. I mean, he might be going straight into the starting 11 now. I'll be honest, and I haven't seen masses of him. I've watched a few clips and stuff. Obviously, when it came out the other day, looks like a talented young player. Is he ready to play in the Premier League week in, week out? I wouldn't say so. I think if you're going into a game and you've got him on the left-hand side and you've got Yoro on the right-hand side and you've got maybe a error-prone Maguire in the middle, you can't rely on that as a football club. So I think Amorim will be hoping that Luke Shaw can come back in and kind of stabilise, because Luke Shaw can play that position. We've seen him do it before, and I think it actually suits him, to be honest. He doesn't have to run as much, which probably suits his body type and injuries and stuff like that. And he's good on the ball. He's the one that can progress the ball, similar to how Martinez does. So I'd be hoping he comes back in and he's the one that is playing there. Obviously, Heaven will get a chance, maybe in Europa games and stuff like that.
For me,
Yeah,
Sorry,
I
Dad,
think
go on.
it's quite unfair for a player like Aidan Heaven to come in. I mean, I expected him to come in and sort of sit where Johnny Evans has been. You might see him a few times a season for a few years, and he's just building with the squad. But when you've got a massive injury, it
Yeah.
then moves into where maybe Harry Maguire is sort of now, where you're actually going to be playing quite a lot, and I don't think he's ready to do that. So I think it's so important for Luke Shaw to come in and potentially take that left centre-back position. But I think the big issue is you're then putting a lot of pressure on Dorgu to say, that's your position now. Militia's not there. Delone needs to be moving back over the other side, unless Mazraoui sits at right centre back and
Yeah,
everyone
he brings
moves over
them
a little bit, unless they
Yeah.
do it that way. But we've got options. I think we can survive without Lisandro Martinez. Yes, we're going to miss loads. We're going to miss him. But I think we can survive quite well without him, just by with Mazraoui, Luke Shaw. I think we can do quite fine with that. And obviously, maybe this is good for Aidan Heaven because he might get game time he wouldn't have got. And I'm a big fan that young players need game time. But in an ideal world, I'd have liked to have brought him in and loaned him straight back out.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if Shaw stays fit, this Martinez period will be a lot easier to get through. For me, I think that's perfect, him being one of the centre-backs and having Dorgu on the left. But where do you stand on, like, my opinion, Ben, would be you play Heaven over Evans and Lindelof purely because of the long-term sort of vision of Evans and Lindelof don't really have a long-term with us. So you put Heaven in to give him minutes to blood him in instead of just putting one of the old guard in just to fill the spot.
Yeah, I feel like there's a balance and you just have to use a bit of common sense. I mean, Yoro's been chucked in more so recently. Dorgu's obviously a young player. He's not scared to use Mainu in a lot of games, and I think Heaven's going to be in that similar type of mould that if he feels like he's comfortable playing, he'll play. And I think Amarin has probably marginalised them older players. I don't know what Evans is doing. I don't know where he is. Casemiro, he hasn't played any minutes. He's chucking Collier in instead of him, so he trusts his young players. And we've seen him do that at Sporting, kind of blood them players in. He did it with Nuno Mendes, who I think he just turned 17 or something like that, and he kept on playing him. And ultimately, it can be like a baptism of fire. You come into a difficult game, and we saw Yoro have a difficult game against Southampton the other week, but he's come back and done decently well in the last few weeks. And I think ultimately, if you're going to make it at United, you're going to have difficult games.
Yeah, I think he did it with was it Quenda? Is that his name? I think he's 18 or something, and he was like a mainstay, wasn't he? Yeah, 17. Yeah, and he was playing every game, so
I think
he's not scared to do it.
Depend on the game. I think with Aidan Heaven, I think if it's a Man City or a Liverpool, just because we know how physical and how emotional that game could get, I think I'd rather see a Lindelof come in.
Would you put him in against Leicester?
Pardon?
Would you put him in against Leicester in the FA Cup?
100%. Yeah, I think Leicester FA Cup. I think if you've got a Maguire and a Delete either side of him, just either way, they'll protect him a little bit. But I don't want to see too many changes. Personally, I'd rather him play. He's not what's going to be his normal back three for a while. Euro, Delete and Maguire as his back three, and then bring in Dorgu. Let him get his debut against Leicester, because it's a bit of a lesser game. The thing is, as well, you can later on, if he's not working quite well on his debut, you can put a Mazraoui or a Delone over there, which is going to offer a bit of energy. I think for Aidan Heaven, it's just going to be the game. I think you wouldn't, we lose the defender in the Europa League final. I don't feel comfortable bringing Aidan Heaven into that game because he's got no experience. It's quite a tough place. I mean, we saw this with the Man City youngster, wasn't it? Was it Man City?
Oh, the Russian lad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's sometimes it's quite unfortunate. Problem is that can change everything in the next 3-4
Yeah.
games that follows. So if it's like Europa League final and we lose, we're halfway through the game and we lose a Delic, for example, I'd rather bring a Lindelof or a Evans into there just because they know they're going to be a steady Eddie. They've been there before. They know the situation. And they've got that experience.
Yeah.
Unless Aiden the Heaven completely rips it up in training, which obviously no one's gonna know. If he's ripping it up in training, then 100% he needs to be part of that first team, bit like Hamid was.
Yeah, I mean, if he's good, it literally just writes itself, doesn't it? Having a name like Heaven, the TikToks will just be flowing out of our heads, man. With that, it's nice. So today, Ben, I think it's 7 defeats out of our 12 home games, I think it is, in the Premier League today. What's happening at Old Trafford? Why are we struggling so much? Why do we seem better on the road?
I don't know which way it goes, but I went to the who did we play last week? Brighton, and the atmosphere was poor. And I think that's a two-sided thing, because you look at it and you say that the team aren't really doing anything where you're going in and you're absolutely bouncing and delighted to watch them. And then conversely as well, the fans do need to give a bit of something. It was just dead from minute one. And I think we saw the away fans, absolute lunatics the other week, and best in the world. And I think that kind of spurs on the players. And there's not that kind of tension. You can feel the weight of Old Trafford on some of these players. You can see as soon as they make a mistake, they're like, that's it, we're just going to keep it safe, we're going to do this, this and this. Whereas away from home, you don't have that type of pressure on you. And the other side of it as well is that teams will just sit in at Old Trafford. At Crystal Palace, still, regardless of how far United have fallen, Crystal Palace coming to us and sitting in, that's no drama for them. If they come away with a point, they're probably happy with that. If they come away and they've grabbed 2 goals and beaten United at Old Trafford, that's an ultimate day out for them. So it's one of them, really. I think we're just caught in limbo between home and away games.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you can tell over the TV that the atmosphere just feels very nervy. Like it feels like the first goal in the game for the fans, for the players, feels like it's huge. Where do you stand on that, Daz? What's your feeling on that? Why Old Trafford is becoming a bit of an issue?
I know it's going to sound like a cop-off and like I'm repeating myself, but I think it's a lack of leadership and a lack of experience in the front line. So they do really well to create these chances like we did in the first half today. And you're great for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then it starts to get a bit frustrating. The issue that we've got is we've got a really productive player in Bruno Fernandes, but he's not a leader. He should be the one that settles this ship and will find the goal. It will come. Just stay calm, keep on the system, keep moving the ball. The ball will come. The goal will come, sorry. And that's what he should be, like as a captain. But he isn't, because he's the first person. Saw it today. The minute he misses 2 good opportunities, his head goes down and he's moaning at himself. And that's relaying to the players. And these are young players as well, Garnacho and Ahmed. So they're naturally going to get a bit frustrated early, especially when they have times where they're the heroes in individual games and they're like, we can do this, we're great, we can score. And it's just not happening for them. And I think that is poor leadership. That is poor experience. And I think that this is where it would be so important to have a player as a captain that lifts the players around him. And because, one of the earliest memories, I know I'm using probably one of the greatest captains of all time, but it's just one of the earliest memories. There was times that I remember when I was a kid watching football and Puyol, you'd see his team go 1-0 down and he'd be the first to drag him off the floor and say, come on, look, we're in this still. We can get back in this. And you know what I mean? But Bruno doesn't do that. When we've openly spoke about how he's not a captain, but he's a great footballer. And I just feel as if we either need an experienced player up there that can help lead this team, or we need a true captain up there. And I think we're lacking majorly. And I think that's it. I think if we'd have scored 2 goals in the first half today, it'd have been a completely different story. That confidence would have led to a 3rd goal and maybe a 4th goal. But when you're feeling, because we dominated possession, but like I said to you, it was 72% possession going into half time, but it was productive. I actually said to you, looks like a completely different team. We look like we're attacking the ball, we're making passes, we wanting to go forward with it. And it was frustrating because we hadn't scored, but then you then get caught with a goal. And the shift and the mood completely changes, and we've seen that loads this year, where we've gone 1-0 down in games with maybe we was the better team, and it's just like a leadership for me that there's nobody picking this team up, and let's get another goal.
You can see with the players, can't you? When we went 1-0 down, fair enough, we're trying to push it a little bit then after that, but when passes are going awry and things just aren't, like Garner's head's going down, Ahmad's sort of flailing his arms around, you can see there's a real lack of confidence there. Do you think the crowd being a bit flat, Ben, do you think that kind of goes hand in hand with how cautious we are when we're going forward? Like, players maybe aren't wanting to sort of push the button a little bit in case they lose possession or in case they cost us a goal?
Yeah, the players have probably seen the reaction to Xerxes a couple of weeks ago, and bits and bobs like that have gone on, where I don't like that type of stuff where you're booing players who are coming off and stuff like that. I think moaning at a player for misplacing a pass, that's always going to happen ultimately. But that always has happened at United, or since I can remember anyway. That's part and parcel of the game. But the best players ultimately don't care. Kevin De Bruyne, the years he was actually at his best at Man City, had like the lowest pass percentage in the league or something like that. But he also won a treble and everything. And it's the same with all these different types of players. The only reason Bruno Fernandes is the captain and creates so many chances is because he doesn't really care what people think. And I think he's willing to play that pass, but he's the only one that's willing to do it. You think of, we've got Agate there who's quite safe, quite technical in terms of keeping the ball ticking over, but he's not going to break the lines for you. But you need more players to be doing it on 1 and 2 touch. We saw it the other night, or you two saw it. I was fast asleep. But when they actually play 1-2 touch, they're actually decent footballers. It's just playing with that intent. And if you watch that Sporting team against, like Daz said, against City, as soon as them 2 10s get on the ball, the first thing they do is turn and they say, right, where's Gyökeres? And he's gone in behind. But we're just missing the fundamentals of knowing that Højlund's going to make the run, or knowing that you're going to get the ball into feet at the right time. We're missing them fundamentals. So ultimately, the players are getting the ball and then they're thinking, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. It's only really Ahmad who understands his position, who gets the ball and turns and runs at his play straight away. I think the rest of the players are just taking an extra half a second and a second, and ultimately half a second in the Premier League is like half a day.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we're just missing a bit of bravery. I think, like you say, Bruno, he may misplay sort of 4 or 5 passes, but he'll get those sort of 2 or 3 very good passes in, and he'll get us through. I just think we're missing. I mean, Daz says about like Puyol back in those days. I remember United, we'd have Giggs, we'd have Becks, we'd have Scholes, we'd have Rooney, there'd be multiple avenues where we'd be breaking teams down from. At the moment, it feels like everyone is looking for Bruno, and it's just we just don't have enough creativity. But I think that's the lack
it
falls down to the lack of quality.
We know that's the lack of the quality in the team. People know that he is the superstar. I mean, people will disagree. I think he is Man United's only world-class player. And probably, I think it was similar when Jack Grealish was at Aston Villa. Villa at that point in time was constantly looking for Jack Grealish, which made him look like a better player than he probably was. But that was just because he always had the ball. But I just think we need more leaders in this. I love the fact that we're bringing in the Dorgus and your Masraois, but I think we need leaders in this team because I think leaders will win games where talent necessarily won't. I mean, I once heard Alex Ferguson said, at any given time, I had 10 leaders on the pitch, but I never had 10 world-class players. And that was the big difference. I don't think Gary Neville was a world-class player, but I think he was a leader. But because he was a leader, that right-hand side was covered. I think the same with certain players in that team. I don't think Owen Hargreaves was a world-class player, but he was a bit of a leader. Him and Michael Carrick, they led that midfield and they were so good at it. But, and we just don't have that. And I think we really need that. I think I'd have liked to have thought that Lisandro Martinez would have grown into that position. We know Mateus still is a natural leader based on what we've seen. But from midfield upwards, we've got no leaders in that team. Maybe we can develop one over time, but we need that now. And I think that this is why it's so important to find the balance moving forward, that we're not just finding them £25 million Dorgus. Sometimes you have just got to pay £60 million for a leader. But what he'll do for that team, I mean, one example would have been Declan Rice. I'd have happily chucked £100 million at him. Not because he was an £100 million player, but I think he's an £100 million leader.
Yeah.
And I think, that is enough. Sometimes that makes up for not being a £100 million player, because you offer maybe £50 million worth of player, £50 million worth of leader, but that benefits the players around you. And
yeah, I think you're right. I mean, he absolutely transformed Arsenal's midfield, hasn't he, Declan Rice? And the way he moves the ball forward, he's a very good player. I think we'll end today's sort of assessment of today's game anyway. How many of those Crystal Palace players, Ben, get into the Man U starting 11?
I'll need to look back at their squad.
So you've got, say, Mateta up top.
Yeah, definitely.
You've got Eze.
He came on, didn't he? I think Eze. Yeah, he gets in.
Henderson, Gahey.
Yeah.
Who was the other one? Then you've got what? Muniz at right back. Will Hughes in the middle.
Not Will Hughes, because I don't like.
Not Will Hughes. So we're probably saying maybe half of that 11 would get into the United team. Yeah. I think just stuff like that. I think it just shows. I mean, for me, Mateta is absolute miles better than what we've got up top. That first half, that run he did from their penalty area to ours, he just looked like a fucking train, didn't he? Like he was a proper going man. I'd love to see Højlund do that, or Xerxes, and actually look like they have control of the ball. Yeah, but I think that just shows the lack of quality that we've got. But yeah, I think we'll leave today's game there. It was just another day at the Old Trafford office, sadly for United. But we're a day away from the transfer window closing. I'm going to come to you on this one, Daz. So Dorgu's come in. Good signing.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has the personal preference on this. I personally would have gone for Alvaro Fernandez, just because he has an English football background, just because he's been part of this United team, and he will have, even as an academy player, he will have had a little bit of an idea of the expectations that this team requires. And he was a little bit cheaper, and I think that he had done a better job at Benfica than Dorgu did at Leeds. That's my opinion. But the scouting report, from what I've done on Dorgu, is fast. He can play both the defensive and offensive game. He's a proper wing back. He's not a left back. He's not a left winger. He's a left wing back, which is something we actually don't have in this team. We don't have a natural left wing back. So he's at the right age, at the right money, and I think it's the one position where you can invest in a player like, for the future, because you can cope with it not being 10 out of 10, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think as a signing, it was absolutely great, because I would have been the first to moan if we'd have brought in a world-class left back and paid £100 million.
Yeah, that's fair. another rumor that's around, Ben, is Tell from Bayern Munich. Obviously, like reports tonight are saying it looks like it's on its arse a little bit because Bayern Munich want an obligation to buy at the end of the loan deal. Are you happy that United look like they may have walked away from that one because of that?
I'm caught in two minds, to be honest, because similar to what Daz said earlier about leadership, I think we are in a position now where we've let Anthony go, regardless of how good you think he is. Rashford has literally just signed for Aston Villa. Ultimately, we need a footballer that can play in that forward position. And sometimes you have to just go out and you just have to pay the money. You just have to do the deal. If they've got another one lined up and they can go and get even Leon Bailey, I mean, is he really going to elevate the team that much? And the thing that I was looking at is that Tell's not naturally a fit into that system. Tell's kind of similar to like a Garner and a Rashford in terms of he's quite explosive. It probably looks better out on the flank. So what are we really doing with that? Was he the one player that was available? Was he on a list somewhere? It just feels a little bit awkward, to be honest.
A bit panicky, maybe?
Yeah.
A bit panicky,
yeah. And ultimately, they've pulled out the deal, whether that's right, whether that's wrong. But we definitely need to go and get someone in this next, what have we got, 24, 26 hours or whatever it might be.
Yeah. I'll come over to you with this one, Daz, because we've had a few discussions about this. We need goals in this team, don't we?
Yeah.
Would Tell sort that, given this? I know you're a big stats man. Would Tell sort that out?
This is the one position, like Ben just said, we need to get right. We've got two players in Xerxes and Hoyland that we can babysit, that we can potentially develop into good players. We've got Obi Martin that could develop into becoming a Ray Rooney. We don't need that right now. We need goals. And no, even if we brought Harry Kane into this team, he's not going to guarantee 25, 30 goals in this team because, let's be fair, Cristiano Ronaldo not so long ago couldn't score 30 goals in this team. So no player guarantees goals in this Man United team. But you do need to make an educated guess. And when you look at Tell's goal-scoring record, and I know he's had to play second fiddle for 18 months to Harry Kane, I'm aware of that, but he's still played over 100 games in 4 years and has less than 10 goals. You compare him to Hoyland in the Premier League, last year, Hoyland has scored more goals in 1 year than Tell has in 4. So for me, Hoyland's a better option just based on that. That doesn't mean that Tell couldn't develop into being a better player, but we need goals now. And with this position, it has to be right. And this was one of the reasons why I didn't fancy Nkunku either, because there's no you're not going to find a pedigree like a Harry Kane in the market, but you can find somebody that has regularly been scoring goals consistently for 4 or 5 years over a certain amount, because the habit of scoring is so important in a striker. That confidence that you score every week or every other week is so important for your mentality as a forward. But when you've only scored 10 goals in 100 games, you've not got that pedigree mindset of scoring goals because you've not scored enough goals to have that. And that's why I don't like Tell. I mean, I'm all up for bringing in a young, promising player, but we've got to. It's what Hoyland and Xerxes was. If you want to get rid of both of them and then bring Tell in, I'm all up for that. But we can't have another player that we're babysitting.
Yeah, for me, it's the obligation to buy thing. I'd be happy him coming in for 6 months and have a look, and then if we fancy him, then we have a go. But you can just tell from us all talking, we're like desperate for someone to come in, aren't we? And even we're like, let's get this one in. But I quite like the fact the board have pulled out of this one. If it doesn't feel right long term financially, even if it does leave us short, there's not many other rumours, is there? Garnacho, we'll stay with you, Daz. Garnacho, are you happy he's staying? And would you have kept him?
I'm not convinced he's staying yet. I think the early signs as of right now, the day before the window shuts, do tell us he's going to stay, but I'm still not convinced he does. I think there's going to be a few more surprises tomorrow, a few more twists, a few more turns in there. I think Rashford going out, especially if there's an option to buy, which I believe there is. You know, there could be, you could plan for the future if you know, you know, if it's an obligation, for example, and you know you're getting £40 million for him next year, you can say, we keep him. I actually said it was either going to be Garnacho or Rashford. They needed one to leave the club to meet PSR rules. One had to leave. You know, you save big money on wages with Rashford, but you potentially get a 60-70 million fee for Garnacho. So I think from a PSR point of view, the club needed one to leave, and obviously Rashford's the one that's leaving. Which means that we can tackle the PSR problem in the summer and not now, which allows us to invest a little bit. I'm still on the fence for Garnacho. I'm not convinced that he is a player that Manchester... I think Bruno is a fantastic player, but I think if you're going to have two number 10s, whether they're slightly different, I genuinely believe you need two productive number 10s. Whether that means you've got one like Ahmed that you know is going to score 20 goals a year, and you've got one like Bruno that's going to maybe get 30 goals a year, but they're going to be a mixture of goals and assists to complement each other. At this point in time, I'm not convinced that Garnacho could turn into that player. But I've got no issues with him staying either. I think if a 70, 80 million pound bid came in for him by Chelsea in the morning, I've got no issues with letting him leave, so long as that money is invested straight back into the team tomorrow, which would mean that Ineos would already need to have a short list of players that they go to first thing in the morning, and they'll say, he's coming in, maybe someone that, you know, in our head that we've not thought of. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, I think he's reacted very well to the Amorim sort of, not the criticism, but sort of testing him. I think he's reacted very well. But I think I've said on this show a number of occasions, I never thought Rashford or Garner would work with Amorim.
The question I've got on Garner for you and Ben, then, is in my head, from a next 5-year vision, I'm seeing Bruno Fernandes and Ahmed as our two number 10s. In my head, they're the two I want. Garner doesn't start for Man United. Why not? So if he's going to be a squad player, why not just sell him for 60-70 million and bring in a squad player for 40 million quid? If he's not a starter, would you not sell him?
But wouldn't you want options though? Like you said earlier in the show, he's better coming off the bench. Wouldn't you need options, don't you? You can't just have two 10s and that's it. That's kind of what I was saying to you at the start of the window. If Nkunku is available, he's another option. Same with Leon Bailey. He's another option. Like today, when we're 1-0 down, you see Højlund and Xerxes get off the bench. I don't know about you two guys, but I had no confidence at all that they were getting us the equaliser or the winner of that game. We need options and we need options and numbers.
We're not going to thing to be mindful of though when we're discussing whether we sell him or not is he's not a number 10. He's very much a winger that's trying to be converted to a number 10. I think. Would you not want a natural number 10 over Garnacho? Someone that you know plays that position? That's
Go on, Ben. I'll let you go with
that. I will say that I don't have the confidence in Ineos currently to go out and get us the player that we need to get. We've just seen Cunha's signed a new deal at Wolves. He'd have been literally perfect for that position. And we can't go and do it. If you knew that there was a possibility that Garnacho was going to go for 60 million, you go and get Cunha done before that even happens. And that's my one hesitation, is that if we get down the line and we've let Marcus Rashford go, was he our top goal scorer 2 years ago? Was he even our top scorer last year? Possibly.
He might even be right there this year. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he probably still is. Yeah, and he hasn't played for 12 games. And then second, third on that list, who was that? It was Garnacho. You're going to let both of them go, and you're not going to replace them. And then you're going to spend 100 million on. I know this isn't necessarily Ineos is doing, but we're in a situation now where you need to just plug the holes that need plugging. And ultimately, we highlighted that left wing back spot as an issue. And granted, they've gone out and done it. But like Barry says there, Rashford for Bailey, that is no swap there. You may as well just go and get Igalo again. Go and see if he wants a game, because ultimately Igalo improve. How mad is that to say that Igalo improves this team?
Yeah.
Someone mentioned Cavani. That Cavani deal, if you could go back and do that again right now,
you take it.
Do it, because it's just a quality player. I remember that game against Tottenham where we played Ronaldo and Cavani up front. And before the game, I was sat there thinking, why is he playing two 30-odd-year-olds up front? And then they both went and assisted each other and scored the goals, and we beat Tottenham away from home. It's just a little bit of quality, a little bit of nous, whatever it is, that we just don't have in that front line. And we seem to be selling the only players that have got anything or shown anything.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, on Garnacho, for me, as I said earlier in the show, he has that little bit of stardust. And I think you have to be replacing that. It's who you bring in.
£70 million could be spent better, could replace him in different numbers. But I just want to answer Barry's comment really quick. I'm assuming he's referring to Leon Bailey at Aston Villa. Why would you swap a player that can score 30 goals for a player that's never scored more than 10?
But again, that comes down to giving us numbers. Rashford, in essence, is a nothing because he's never playing. Whereas Bailey gives us an option and a number.
In attacking, we don't need numbers because
we need options.
The current lineup we've got Mason Mount as a backup. You've got Xerxes, Hoyland that you'd argue could be backups. You've who else we got? We've got Garnacho, who we said if it's going to be Ahmed and Bruno's a backup. That's 4 backups. We need a world-class number 9 that can score 25 to 30 goals a year, or somebody that can get close to that. That's not going to be a player that can't score 10 goals a season.
But that's equally not going to happen in January either. Though. You're not gonna get a Gyökeres or Osimhen in January, are you? But if Diallo comes off the pitch today, who's giving us that pace off the bench? No one.
I disagree. I think there is a number 9 on the market right now that's gettable, and I think you'd get him for less than 35 million quid, and I think he would get as close to that 30 goal mark as anyone.
Go on.
Jonathan David. He's consistently
I was literally going to say that.
He has consistently scored more than 25 goals a season for 10 seasons. Now, yes, I know it's only in the French league, but he's done that number consistently for 10 seasons. Now, that is a habit. What we was talking about, that being in the habit of scoring, Jonathan David scores every other game. He knows how to score. I'm not saying that that's going to transfer to the Premier League, because that doesn't always work like that. But he's still young, he's fast, he likes to run on the ball, everything that Amaran likes in a centre forward, but he knows how to drop a bit deeper and work really hard, which Man United have lacked in a number 9, which similar to Harry Kane. Harry Kane can be a number 9, but he can drop into a 10 when the game needs to be a bit nitty-gritty and let one of his forwards, overlap him. Jonathan David can do that, and he's out of contract in the summer. So he's free in the summer. The problem is, in the summer, as a free transfer, you could argue that Chelsea, Arsenal, who are both looking for strikers in the Champions League, even Nottingham Forest, that would be looking to replace Chris Wood because of his age, would potentially be a more attractive target than Manchester United.
Do you not think it's a red flag? Because he has scored lots of goals for Lille, hasn't he? He's been very prolific over a few years. Do you not think it's a little bit of a red flag that his contract's just running down and no one is having that bite on him? He always seems to be he always seems to be linked to clubs.
I see that comment all of the time, but actually he has had quite a lot of approaches for him over the years, and his club has just basically said he's under contract, you're not having him, he's not for sale. And his club have reportedly turned down money from Napoli over the years, Italian clubs, English clubs, and apparently his club are basically saying he's not for sale, you're not having him, and they've just refused to talk to anyone apparently. And this is ultimately why he's let his contract run down, because he wants to leave it. It's the only way he can leave. I think with 6 months left on his contract, I think they'll take 35 million quid for him. I think they'll take a swap deal for Xerxes or Hoyland plus a bit of money.
I don't know. I'm not convinced. Like I said to you in our private messages, Daz, I'd definitely take Jonathan David. I think he's a very good player. If you was to give me him and Gyökeres or Osherman in the summer, bite your hand off. I'd be very happy with that as a summer business. Just on the talk of Lille, would you take Angel Gomez back in the summer, Ben, on a free transfer?
I think I'm at the point with this United team, to be honest, where I feel like
Anyone.
I take anyone.
Yeah.
The Paul Pogba rumours circulated again last week, and ultimately, I was sat there thinking, are we really doing this again? But then I was thinking, does Paul Pogba add anything to this team? And yeah, he does. He adds a lot of quality into that midfield. And as the club shouldn't do that deal. We shouldn't probably do the Gomez deal. But if you look at it and you look at games like today, and you're saying, right, we need a little bit more invention off the bench or whatever it might be to come in alongside Agate, could you see him and Agate playing in midfield? Yeah, definitely. And I think just going back onto the Jonathan David situation, I think that's where Ineos had shown sensible in the market is going out and saying, right, we need the player now. Should we go and pay a bit and avoid any hassle in the summer? Because if we go into the summer and he's our man and we're banking on getting him on a free transfer in the summer, and then he goes to PSG because he wants to stay in France, then what do? We end up scrambling around for the rest of the summer, and then you have to go and pay 100 million for Gyökeres or whatever it might be. So I think it's just showing your smarts, really. And I think that striker position is the next one on the list. We've done the left wing back. Go and get the striker now, and go and get him now if you can.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I can't see it happening, but I don't disagree. There's only one place we can really finish here, and it's Marcus Rashford, I'm afraid. Probably the last time we're going to talk about Marcus Rashford on All for United. So the deal does, they're going to cover 75% of his wages with a 40 million future fee if they choose to take him on a permanent. Is that a good deal for us?
From a financial point of view, it's a fantastic deal. I mean, 75% of his wages. I'm not good at maths, but what's that? 200 grand a week. 200
more than that,
yeah. I'm not good at maths, but £40 million for a player that's of this age and has been out of form for 18 months. It's a gamble for Aston Villa. I heard Unai Emery say that Manchester United, he's shocked that Manchester United's allowed one of the most deadly finishes in world football leave the club. So obviously he's done his scouting report on Rashford. Obviously he thinks that he can get the best out of Rashford. From a financial standpoint, I think it's 100% a good deal for Manchester United.
Yeah.
The only issue we've got is if Manchester United get their act together in the summer, and we bring in a goal scorer, I think we're closer to the top 4 than people think, because I think we scored 25 goals this year. We're not far off top 4, because you turn some of them draws into wins, some of them small losses into draws. We're not actually far from top 4. And the fact that in recent years we've been in the top 4 tells me we're not that far from the top 4. But it does depend on a right window. We've just given, arguably, our best player, our best goal scorer, should I say. I know we're not getting that out of him, but in terms of what we know, we've just given our best goal scorer to a direct team that will be challenging us for top 4 next season. If Marcus Rashford scores 30 goals next year and they finish 4th and we finish 5th, Ruben Amorim's going to look very, very silly. I'm not saying Rashford will score 30 goals next year, but that's, how, or Man United could play a blinder and he could go to Aston Villa and do a Jack Grealish and just score 1 goal in 2 years. We don't know. But if anyone can get the most out of him, it is going to be a manager like Unai Emery, because he is a fantastic coach and we've seen him turn average players into very good players at Aston Villa. I'd rather have sent him abroad just because we know he can score 30 goals, and I think he has still got that in him under the right manager in the right team. I just don't like the fact that it is going to be for a team that could challenge us for top 4 next year. I just don't like that.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised he's staying in the league, to be honest. But I just think I think that's a sign of how much they wanted to get him out, to be honest, and they needed to
Unless
get him
his
off that wage bill.
priority is still Barcelona, and he's just accepted he's got to move somewhere this year, get some goals, which will ultimately make him a better prospect for Barcelona in the summer. Especially if he scores 15 goals, he won't, but if he did, he's going to be a really good prospect. And obviously, Barcelona in the summer will be in a better position to mess with their financial fair play system. Maybe that still is his goal. Maybe the summer, if he does score some goals this year, maybe it opens more avenues for him. Or maybe he does score 15 goals. Aston Villa do get top 4, and he thinks, I'm in the right place.
Yeah, I mean, I've got no hard feelings at all for him. I mean, he's let himself down a lot with his attitude and stuff over the last couple of years. But I hope he goes well, and I don't hope, like you said the other day, Daz, that he goes to Man City and scores 30 goals. But I hope he does okay. But Ben, it's just a sad end, isn't it? It feels like I'm seeing all these compilations of him scoring against Midtjylland, and I'm like welling up. Do you know what I mean? It's like it feels like really sad. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm quite a romantic when it comes to football, to be honest, and I quite like that side of it as soft or whatever as it sounds.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a massive part of Manchester United is the academy graduates, the reliance on them to come through into the first team. And I did a video earlier, and like you, I was going through the compilations and watching the videos and stuff like that, and they have all the sad music over the top of it.
Yeah.
And you're sat on your sofa and you're thinking, is this really happening? And the photos actually just come up like whilst we've been on this of him signing his Villa contract, wearing a Villa tracksuit, and it's almost like it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's ever going to feel right, because my idea of Rashford was that he'd get as high as he could on that goal scoring list and he'd retire here. Ultimately, we sometimes look at him and we put him sometimes on the level of like an Mbappe, and we compare him to like a Rooney or Ronaldo or whatever it might have been. He's never really been on that level, but ultimately that's not an issue. That shouldn't be the standard for every single player. No. I think the issue has come that we've decided to pay him that amount of wages, and we've got to the point where his output for that amount of wages has to be 25 goals a season minimum, and he just can't do that. If he was still on 100 grand a week and he was scoring 10 goals a season, but it's Marcus Rashford, he's from Wivenshaw, he loves the club, I would be up for that all day long. But ultimately, I think it's the financial side of it. Ineos have come in and said he's not doing what he needs. They're looking at it like a business. If they had someone on 100 grand a week in the media team or whatever, and they weren't doing anything, they'd turn around and they'd say, you're gone. And I think that's ultimately what it's coming down to. And it's sad. Yeah, I'm going to have to stay off TikTok or else I'll be crying all night.
Yeah, seeing him in the Villa tracksuit is going to be very different. Do you think that contract was the beginning of the end of him, Daz?
I think
both from how fans view him.
100%. I think at that point, having had the season of a lifetime, and I genuinely think if Man United had been successful that year, he'd have been in the top 10 Ballon d'Or shortlist. He had such a good season. He was that good, and he had that form for England as well in them early games, didn't he? And I think, in hindsight, I think Man United had to offer him a booster contract. They had to bump him up a little bit. I think what I would maybe have done, but like what Ben said, is when you're paying player 350k a week, he has to score 25, 30 goals every single year, unless you get injured and then you dip a little bit. But, the goals per game has still really got to be there. And but to do that, you have to make an educated guess, a bit like what I said with picking a new striker. You look at Marcus Rashford's career and you're expecting a player to score 30 goals a season that's only ever done it once.
Yeah.
Your brain tells you he probably isn't capable of that. He's just had maybe a bit like Chris Wood this year. He's never scored this many goals. He's probably not going to score this many goals next season. He's just having a season of a lifetime. So maybe offer him a booster contract with the agreement that we come back to it in 18 months. So actually, if you score 30 goals next year and you're 15 goals midway through that that 18-month period, that's another 50, 60 goals, and you might be, yeah, let's give him 300k a week because that's now 3 seasons he's done this.
Yeah.
But so I think ultimately when you pay a player such a high wage, it kills you if the player's crap. If that makes sense, it does kill you. It's a bit like this season. We've had games where Mazraoui hasn't been that good, but nobody's noticed it because he was what, £20 million player on about
like Anthony.
100. You know what
like
I mean?
Anthony. It kills them, don't it?
Yeah. So you can't blame Rashford for that in a way, though. His job as his agent, his brother's job is to negotiate the best possible deal as a footballer. That was 300k a week. He signed it. You blame the club. It was poor management by the club, poor leadership by the club, and but it could just be that we're expecting Marcus Rashford to be a player that he's never been.
Yeah,
just
like you say,
season.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there was wrong on both parts really. I think the club just massively overpaid him, haven't they? In the same way we have with Martial in the past, in the same way we probably have with Casemiro.
I think he was that winger that you'd have expected 15 goals a year out of him. The other winger, 15 goals a year, and then you centre forward, you want 30 goals a year out of him. I don't think Marcus Rashford was ever going to be our best goal scorer, although he was on that 1 year. But he was contributing, which ultimately leads to being further up the table because as a team, you're scoring more goals. But I think a mixture between such a high contract and expectations of a player that has only ever done that once,
I mean, we don't know. We don't know if other clubs were floating around him, and I mean, if PSG were floating around him and they were offering him X, and we've thought, oh, he's just scored 30 goals. We best bang on a big one here, and I think it's just come to bite us in the arse. I think us as fans suddenly expect a lot when you're on that much money, and when you have done it once, I think you automatically expect. I think it's a really sad end when I just hope he doesn't come out and say anything that's. I just hope he doesn't say anything in the press. I hope he leaves in good. That we can all look back at Rashford, that he was very good for a period of time, but he's moved on, and let's just all put a line under it.
He said though that there's not going to be any ill comments when he leaves United.
Yeah.
I think he's naturally going to get asked what went, probably not on his loan move, but in the summer he's probably going to get asked what went wrong at United. I'm just hoping that he says it just was the right time to leave, something like that. It was just my time to move on and just draw a line underneath it. Whereas someone like Dean Henderson just went into complete prick mode when he left. I just don't want that for Rashford because we do hold so many really good memories of Marcus Rashford.
Yeah.
I mean, the one for me was that night in Paris,
Paris, yeah.
We do hold some really good memories of him, and I don't want the last 18 months to overshadow, that we had 7-8 good years out of him and he had some magic moments.
I mean,
it was a credit to our academy.
Yeah, it'd be very sad if he came back and one of these players that gets booed every time he's on the ball and stuff like that. It'd be very sad if it went down that route. But yeah, I mean, it's just sad. It is just sad. I think we're going to leave it there, boys. I think we've covered everything. Yeah, I've exhausted all my notes. So I think that's got to be time to call it a day. I think. Ben, where can everyone see you?
Yeah, over on TikTok. I think that's my name on TikTok. Ben Wilson.
Ben Wilson, yeah, it is, yeah.
I think so. Just over on there daily.
Because someone else called Ben Talks Football, isn't there?
I've changed my name.
Have you changed it now? Because I'm sure I used to search for you on there and it would bring up this other geezer. So that's him.
It's a Spurs fan.
That's him, yeah. Ben Bowman or something like that. That's him. Yeah. Daz, where can we find you, buddy?
TikTok as well. That's stay controversial.
Lovely stuff. Well, cheers for everyone that's watched, be it live or be it at your own leisure. not a great day for United, but it's like I said earlier. It's just another day in the office, another day in the Old Trafford office. Leicester next Friday. I will be back on Sunday, I believe. I think there may be a show in the week, but I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that. I'm not sure. If Barry's in the comments, he'll tell you who's the boss. But yeah, I'll catch you next Sunday and have a lovely week. Take care of each other. Take care.